Welcome everyone, I am Adeshewa Josh and this is Africa Matters. This week we take the pulse of the African continent and assess how its global standing, politics, economy and security are shaping up. In South Africa, we follow a group of young people who are promoting a reading culture that had been a closed book in black majority areas during apartheid. And in Zimbabwe, African countries discuss the elephant in the room. As some lobby for a one-off sale of ivory, others argue it could fuel poaching. It's been nearly 60 years since the idea of a united Africa was born. 32 countries signed a charter forming the Organization of African Unity in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, in 1963. The goal was to fight for the sovereignty and freedom of African people from colonial and neo-colonial rule, as well as political and economic integration across the continent. In 2002, the OAU was replaced by the African Union, a regional body which now has all 55 independent countries as members. So we went to the streets of Nairobi, Johannesburg, and Abuja and asked what you think about the state of the African continent today.
We have our own challenges, but we also have our own opportunities. As a people, if we come together and build our motherland, we can also make Africa the pride of the world.
Africa is a great continent. I believe it has great wealth of resources, but I believe that the leadership is really lacking. In terms of development, development is very slow, as I see it. I believe we don't have leaders who are eager to, progress the continent.
The problem with Africa is we got so much leaders who are self-centered. You find that the resources that we got in Africa, instead of utilizing the resources to help the people and the public, they use the resources which are available in Africa to just enrich themselves. So I think if we will have selfless leaders, Africa will be in a better place.
So, how can we make Africa a better place? And what do you think leaders must do to fix the challenges that the continent faces? We ask some of you what you think.
And they're missing one of the most fundamental important things that are crucial for taking a country forward, which is manufacturing. Right? So if you look at big economies in this world, I'm talking about US, Germany, I'm talking about Japan, China, these four countries that are listed right now, they are mostly focusing on manufacturing, which is, it shows that it's a very important key thing thing that they should be doing in terms of taking the country forward.
We need a group of individuals that have like minds about development, about consistency, about focus, about determination to get Africa out of where it is. Where it is not where it needs to be. And the reason is because we are not on the same page. We are all sounding discordant tunes in Africa. The leaders, even when they come to a meeting, they're not on the same page.
We need to work on our leadership. The problem why Africa is way behind is leadership. Yeah. When we have good management, good leadership, Africa is going to be great.
But good governance and African unity appear to be elusive for now. And nearly 80% of Africa's population is below the age of 35. Experts predict that the continent is growing rapidly, and by 2050, 2 in every 5 children in the world will be born in Africa. This could either transform the continent if we tap into their human capital and resources, or worsen poverty and inequality, thereby threatening peace and security. So I asked Aya Chebi, a former African Union's youth envoy, what young people can do now to instigate the changes they would love to see.
I think, first of all, we need a lot more organizing as young people. When I went into the intergovernmental space, I navigated bureaucracy. I understood how that actually government functioned because a lot of young people are in civil society or in entrepreneurship spaces or in the artist spaces, don't have much knowledge of what actually government is and how does government function. And if we inherit systems we didn't co-design, we are setting ourselves to failure. So I think part of it is to make sure that every young person has an internship in government. Every young person should go into government, whatever their aspirations afterwards would be. We need to understand how government functions.
Now, one of the founding principles of the African Union calls for collective action, not only in Africa, but with the rest of the world. Russia's attack on Ukraine and their access to COVID-19 vaccines are some of the issues that have recently tested Africa's position. Let's take a closer look. In March, more than 70% of the UN member states voted in favor of a resolution condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine and called for the immediate withdrawal of its forces. But almost half of the countries that abstained from the vote came from Africa, with only Eritrea voting against it. However, African countries were unified in calling out the massive disparity in accessing COVID-19 vaccines at the height of the pandemic. This means most of them will miss a World Health Organization goal to vaccinate 70% of the population in every country against COVID-19 by the end of next month. The UN says 75% of the people in high-income countries are fully vaccinated, but only 16% of the people across Africa have received 2 doses or more. Until the coronavirus pandemic, Africa was home to 5 of the fastest growing economies in the world. The UN says more than 25 million people on the continent are now struggling to meet their basic food needs. So many are hoping that the rollout of the African Continental Free Trade Area, an initiative that aims to bring together Africa's 1.3 billion people in a $3.4 trillion economic bloc, will help lift them out of poverty. The UN says Africa's peace and security are being threatened by the rising number of militant groups on the continent. The Sahel is home to the world's fastest growing and most deadly terrorist groups. And sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 48% of global terrorism deaths. Even though there have been regional security interventions, Africa lacks a unified military force. Let's hear more from Dipo Faloyin, the author of Africa is Not a Country, Breaking Stereotypes of Modern Africa, and he joins me from London. Thank you so much for making our time to speak to Africa Matters.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Since Africa is not a country, but a continent of 55 culturally diverse states, is the idea of a united Africa practically possible?
I think whatever the future holds for the continent depends on the wishes of the individual countries. It's up for each country to decide for themselves what relationship they want, both with their neighbors, but also with the wider continent. We've seen times in the last few decades where countries have worked effectively together, but that will depend on what each individual state and what its people decide for themselves. But I think that there's certainly an opportunity moving forward for the continent to work together, to learn from each other's recent histories, and to build a future that works for everyone.
What would you say the continent has done right in the last 59 years, and what has it got wrong?
I think certainly if you look at the last 59 years since the independence era, countries have done a really, really good job trying to build national identities, trying to build a future for their people. The challenges that they were given during colonialism were vast. Many of these countries were built essentially to fail with a multitude of ethnic groups within one country. And so I think countries have done particularly well to find some sense of, the vast majority of countries to find some sense of stability. I think that at times, I'm from Nigeria, and I think at times we've sort of spent a lot of time trying to sort out some of the indiscretions of the past rather than looking towards the future. But I definitely see that within millennials and younger generations, there's a real desire to look to the future and set a path for themselves.
You said build national identities. Wouldn't that be rebuild national identities? Because the colonial era kind of washed away most people's sense of belonging and who they are. It's like it's time to rethink and recreate who they are. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. There is that opportunity to really define define our cultures, to define ourselves. That wasn't something that was that we had during the colonial era, while we were, being ruled by the colonial powers. So that's the biggest challenge for most African countries, for these vast ethnic groups, these vast languages, to come together to decide, what does the future hold for us, and what should our national identities be rooted towards.
What would you say we got wrong, though? You said all the things we got right. What are we getting wrong?
There's not one thing that the entire continent really has gotten wrong. As I said, individual countries will have had moments where they look back and they think, perhaps we shouldn't have done it this way or that way, but there probably isn't a collective wrong for the entire continent. As I said, I look at, a country like Nigeria, and I think that, we could use our position, our vast size and wealth, to be, a greater positive force across the region. And I think that that's something that you see young people trying to do through politics and culture moving forward. But for the entire continent, that there isn't one great right and there isn't one great wrong. This region is so vast, as that it's incredibly complicated.
Before I let you go, one of the major reasons for the establishment of the AU is to bring an African voice to the world. Would you say the organization has succeeded so far in articulating a unified position?
I think that it's a very difficult thing to do, to try and say, all 54 countries should speak with one voice. It's a huge challenge. And, it's one that's not going to come easy. I think that many countries in such a short period of time, have spent the last few decades trying to, simply just establish themselves and, as you say, rebuild their national identities. And so, now that we're in a situation now where, less than 10% of the continent is under authoritarian rule, many countries have a better hold on the sense of democracy and trying to give their own people a voice. And so the more stable, each individual country comes in time, the more opportunity they'll have to look outward and to see themselves as part of a wider story of the continent.
Thank you so much. Dipo Faloyin, the author of Africa is Not a Country, Breaking Stereotypes of Modern Africa. Thank you so much for speaking to Africa Matters.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters Plus.
I'm Columbus Mafunga in Hwange, Zimbabwe's national park, where the government is hoping the ban on ivory trade will be lifted.
I'm Ntshepeng Mutema, and I'll tell you how this bookshop, the only one of its kind in Soweto Township, is spreading literacy and the joy of reading in a community robbed of adequate education by apartheid.
Zimbabwe has just concluded a summit trying to get the UN Convention on International Trade, Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, commonly referred to as CITES, to lift the ban on ivory trade. The Southern African country, along with Botswana, Namibia, and Zambia, argue that lifting the ban can help to better preserve the animals and bring economic benefit to local communities who live close to the animals. Columbus Mavunga reports from outside Hwange, Zimbabwe's largest national park, where some locals say the animals are out of control.
75-year-old Hanganani Gideon Mncube lives just outside the boundary of Hwange National Park, Zimbabwe's biggest home to wildlife. Last year in May, as he was herding cattle, he was trampled by 2 elephants. His leg was badly broken, requiring steel pins to hold it together. He says he now can't provide for his family.
I am attending the conference because I want to see how I feel about elephants since they injured me. I can't do anything anymore for my family. If there is a way, they must reduce the number of elephants by half. They are now too many.
That is what Zimbabwe's government hopes will be the outcome of the conference taking place here, about 800 kilometers west of Harare. Zimbabwe is home to nearly 100,000 elephants, twice what its parks can sustain, and $600 million worth of ivory in stock in Harare. The government is hoping the ban on ivory trade will be lifted later this year.
People are dying almost every day. And it doesn't actually make any sense for us to actually stick to the CITES protocols, the international protocols that bar us from beneficiating from the wildlife that we have, the wildlife that we are looking after, the wildlife that the communities are assisting in actually taking care of. The same communities, without them, we can't be having the stocks that we are talking of. Things are happening right now. It means we are talking of the superpowers who can just impose what they want on us. Superpowers that can dictate what they want to other smaller nations. But the smaller nations have done good in wildlife conservation.
Zimbabwe's government accuses the West of influencing CITES against lifting a ban on trading in elephants and ivory, which it hopes would help sustain conservation and reduce human-wildlife conflict. South Africa, which has about 44,000 elephants, says it has reduced human-wildlife conflict by building boundary fences on its national parks. It says other countries could learn from its practices.
South Africa, on average, deals with about, remove about 40 problem-causing elephants a year in the country. And these are elephants that did manage to have broken through fences, particularly in the greater Kruger area, where they do get into rural communities and can cause particular damage to crops. The major thing that helps us is really good fences that can, for most of the time, keep elephants effectively away from people.
Zimbabwe says it can't afford to take expensive precautions. Instead, it wants to cow the beasts and sell the ivory stockpile to get the resources it needs to continue protecting them. Columbus Mavunga, Africa Matters, Hwange, Zimbabwe.
A movement to promote the culture of reading in South Africa's townships is gathering momentum. Book enthusiasts are coming up with innovative ways to make books fashionable. Under apartheid, the black majority was systematically undereducated and access to literature was restricted. Even today, there are few libraries and bookshops in black communities. Nsepeng Mutema reports from Soweto on efforts to change that.
A lush lawn, like-minded people and literature, all are a big lure at the Soweto Booknik, a picnic for book lovers in South Africa's Soweto Township. The event takes place once a month. Participants come with the book to enjoy on their own or to discuss what they are reading with others. The Booknik is run by Nico Mtembi and her partners, who created it a year ago to nurture the culture of reading in their community.
A lot of the times you find that these events, book launches happen in the suburbs, they happen in towns, in malls, and not necessarily in a setting like this, in the heart of a township.
The Booknik also organizes conversations with authors to give readers a chance to engage with writers. Families are encouraged to bring their children so they grow up with regular exposure to literature. The white supremacist architects of apartheid designed their policies to keep black people barely literate. Inferior education was imposed on Africans, and that made sure they could work only menial jobs as cheap labor. They also didn't see the need to develop library services for blacks because they feared reading could be a source of self-awareness and advancement that would threaten the racial hierarchy.
And so many people in these communities grew up only interacting with books as exercise work in the classroom. Once they finish their schooling, many may never touch a book again. Sadly, even in democratic South Africa, libraries and townships are under-resourced or don't exist at all. Those in public schools operate only when classes are in session.
But the Soweto Book Cafe is open year-round. Tami Mazibuko opened the only locally owned bookshop in this township in 2018. It's more than a business. Those who can't afford to buy are still welcome to come in, grab a seat, and read whatever they like.
Other people have to even start from scratch and show them even what to read, because they don't even know what to read. They might be literate, but when they come here, they see so many books. They don't even know where to start, like what kind of book, so I have to guide them.
The cafe also doubles as a community center. And Mazibuko has joined forces with a literacy program to run sessions for children.
Initially, when we first came here, we would read, and then I would tell all of these stories, and then because we wanted to make reading more fun, we also introduced some arts and some board games and music and exercises.
These bibliophiles hope what they are doing goes beyond making reading cool. They also want to plant the seeds for future writers and publishers in their community. Nsepeng Motema, Africa Matters, Soweto.
You're watching Africa Matters, and here's a roundup of other stories making news across the continent. Senegal's health minister has been sacked after 11 newborns were killed in a fire in the neonatal department of a hospital. The tragedy in the city of Tivaouane has sparked outrage over the country's healthcare safety record, which has included several accidents in recent years. Health authorities say preliminary investigations suggested the blaze was caused by a short circuit. The U.S. Justice Department says it has seized a $3.5 million mansion purchased by former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh. They say it was bought through a trust set up by his wife. It comes just days after the Gambian government accepted recommendations for prosecution of Yahya Jammeh's regime for the killing, torture, rape, and arbitrary detention of hundreds of people during his 22-year rule. And the first African chief of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has been re-elected by a strong majority for another 5-year term. He's played an important role in the response to both the Ebola outbreak and the COVID-19 pandemic. He received more than 2/3 of the votes cast by member countries, but the secret ballot vote was regarded as a formality because Tedros was the only candidate running. Tedros was the former Ethiopian Minister of Health and Foreign Affairs and called himself a child of war on the first day of the World Health Assembly. In Liberia, the sport of surfing is being revitalized. The country's beaches were once known for its surf, but a nearly 2-decade-long civil war has disrupted tourism in the country. But that appears to be changing. Shoaib Hassan has the story.
It's the thrill of the ride that's brought these die-hard surfers to Robertsport. The small fishing village, a few kilometers north of the Liberian capital Monrovia, is the country's epicenter for an emerging surf culture.
We've been here for over a week and we've had really good waves. It's really natural, it's beautiful, it's not too developed. The people are super friendly.
The Liberian Surf Club has grown from humble beginnings to hosting competitions, bringing locals together and drawing in tourists. Former international footballer Musa Shannon has also set up the first ecotourism hotel at the surfing beach.
We've been here for 14 years. We were founded in 2008, and from the day we formed a synergy with surf. We understood the importance of so-called, quote-unquote, riding the wave of surf into the tourism sector. Surf has been good to us. It's given us a lot of notoriety. It's brought a lot of attention. It's brought a lot of international recognition. Most importantly, it's given the young people of Robertsport an opportunity to express themselves in a sport that they never knew before.
A recent competition brought in some serious international talent, but some local teenagers are fast catching up. Organizers say more competitions will bring in important tourism dollars for this impoverished region, and also provide an avenue for locals to eventually compete internationally as they ride ever higher on the waves. Shoaib Hassan, Africa Matters.
This week, we explore Mozambique Island, situated at the entrance of Mossoril Bay in the Mozambique Channel of the Indian Ocean. Since the 10th century, the former capital of colonial Portuguese East Africa has played an important role in intercontinental trade. That's our show this week. Please share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode or ideas you would like us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag #AfricaMatters. Please feel free to reach out to me on my personal handle @AdeshawaJosh. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next week.